Today is January 12th. I am Rob, I'm an alcoholic, and it is a joy to be with you here today in this lifeboat of recovery as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Yesterday we read a couple of pages of There's a Solution. We finished that up, and then we began more about alcoholism in the Big Book, and also we've been journeying through Step 2 of the 12 and 12. And today we'll be reading more about alcoholism, pages 32 through 37. We'll be continuing our work through Step 2 of the 12 and 12, pages 27 through 29. So we are going to continue through this chapter, and let's get to the book. Page 32. Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there's still yet time. We have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period of time because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here's one. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle, and in 2 months he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital in the meantime. Then, gathering all of his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found that he could not. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly, and he was dead within 4 years. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here's a man who at age 55 years found that he was just where he had left off at 30. We've seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in short time as bad as ever. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. Young people may be discouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop as he did on their own willpower. We doubt if any man can do it, because none will really want to stop, and hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find that he can win out. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, have been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who've been drinking for 20 years. To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor take the quantities some of us have. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in just a few years. Certain drinkers, who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics, are astonished at their inability to stop. We, who are familiar with the symptoms, see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere. But try and get them to see it. As we look back, we feel we've gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. If anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. If he's a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of success. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry for anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. How then shall we help our readers determine, to their own satisfaction, whether they're one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think that we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer that we had found. He'd made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business that he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition. He knew that he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had deep affection. Yet, he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be the salesman for a concern I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they had a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I'd get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I had been going to it for years. I'd eaten there many times during the months that I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put just an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed that I was not being any too smart, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey, poured it into some more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all the reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion, of the ability to think straight, be called anything else? Oh wow, there was a lot in that. We'll definitely come back to that in just a second. So we're traveling over to the 12 and 12 now. We're on page 27. And just a quick recap. So this is all about a conversation between a sponsor and a sponsee. And in yesterday's reading, the sponsor says to the sponsee, just take it easy. First, Alcoholics Anonymous does not demand that you believe anything. All of the 12 steps are but suggestions. The sponsor also tells him, to get sober and to stay sober, you don't have to swallow all of step 2 right now. He even admits that he, didn't do all that himself for a little while. And then third, All you really need to do is have a truly open mind. So that's where we left off yesterday. We're going to be reading the bottom paragraph of page 27. This is the sponsor talking to a sponsee. This is only one man's opinion based on his own experience, of course. I must quickly assure you that AAs tread innumerable paths in their quest for faith. If you don't care for one that I've suggested, you'll be sure to discover one that suits you if only you look and listen. Many a man like you has begun to solve the problem by methods of substitution. You can, if you wish, make AA itself your higher power. Here's a very large group of people who have solved their alcohol problem. In this respect, they are certainly a power greater than you, who have not even come close to a solution. Surely you can have faith in them. Even this minimum of faith will be enough. You will find many members who have crossed the threshold just this way, and all of them will tell you that, once across, their faith broadened and deepened. Relieved of the alcohol obsession, their lives unaccountably transformed, and they came to believe in a higher power, and most of them began to talk of God. Consider next the plight of those who once had faith, but have lost it. There will be those who have drifted into indifference, those filled with self-sufficiency who have cut themselves off, those who have become prejudiced against religion, and those who are downright defiant because God has failed to fulfill their demands. Can AA experience tell all these they may still find a faith that works? Sometimes AA comes harder to those who have lost or rejected faith than those who had never had any faith at all, for they think that they have tried faith and found it wanting. They have tried the way of faith and the way of no faith. Since both ways have proved bitterly disappointing, they have concluded that there is no place whatever for them to go. The roadblocks of indifference, fancied self-sufficiency, prejudice, and defiance often prove more solid and formidable for these people than any erected by unconvinced agnostics or even the militant atheist. Religion says that the existence of God can be proved. The agnostic says that it can't be proved, and the atheist claims proof of non-existence of God. Obviously, the dilemma of the wanderer from faith is that of profound confusion. He thinks himself lost to the comfort of any conviction at all. He cannot attain in any small degree the assurance of the believer, the agnostic, or the atheist. He is the bewildered one. Any number of AAs can say to the drifter, "Yes, we were diverted from our childhood faith too. The overconfidence of youth was too much for us. Of course, we were glad that a good home and religious training had given us certain values. We were still sure that we ought to be fairly honest, tolerant, and just, that we ought to be ambitious and hardworking. We became convinced that such simple rules of fair play and decency would be enough." Okay, so one thing that stands out to me in the 12 and 12 here, I like how the sponsor just keeps it basic right now. He's like, hey, if you can't think of anything else right now, what about the group itself? Here are a bunch of miracles sitting right in front of you. People who have somehow remained to be sober today. It kind of goes back to what he was saying. Take it easy. Easy does it. Start simple. What are the facts right in front of you? And I love that. I love that. Then he kind of goes on to talk about, people who've maybe had some bad experiences with religion in the past, roadblocks of indifference, prejudice of, because once you get into the spiritual talk of things, that's a hard barrier for a lot of people, myself included. I can only speak of my own experience, but thankfully I'm sober today because of keeping that open mind, and trying new things and listening to what people told me, people who were far wiser than I was, that thought about alcohol like I did. But, I get the prejudice involved. This chapter certainly speaks to me quite a bit here. Okay, so first things first, remember what I said about italics. So this poor guy, Jim, perfectly respectable, has a great business, doesn't want to lose his family. He's struggling with alcoholism for sure. And it talks about the insanity. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. This is a cunning and baffling disease, and certainly it's happening to poor Jim here. One other thing that stood out to me, too, is on page 35, the bottom of 34 going to 35. I'll just repeat a couple lines real quick. The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. For obviously, this is the crux of the problem. What's the crux of the problem? Our mental state. I can only speak from my own experience once again, but for me, alcohol was the symptom of a deeper rooted mental state. And I would turn to alcohol to numb them or to quiet them or whatever it might be. But that's why he talks about this. And if you think about it, good old Jim, our buddy Jim here, he's got some resentments towards his boss. Because here he is working at a salesman in the firm that he once owned. There is a resentment there if you dig deep enough. You can see it. And resentments certainly play a part in our mental state and can lead us to a drink. Once I have that drink, buddy, it is on. So I think that's a great demonstration there. He uses Jim as an example here of the insanity once it kicks in after that drink. The obsession of the mind and then the allergy of the body. Even before that, he says, let him try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. And in my early 20s, I did that. I was able to quit drinking on my own through willpower alone for a year. And buddy, I always kept that in my back pocket. I always thought, well, surely if I really want to stop, I can because I did it once before. I just don't want to stop. Well, then there came the time where I didn't want to stop and I would try to stop. I'd pray that I could stop. And I couldn't. In my 30s, I could not do that. So I've been there. For me, it has been a progressive disease. So a lot of this speaks to me today. All right, so that's going to wrap up a pretty long episode today. Thank you so much for joining me. And again, it's such an honor just to be here. I am learning a ton and getting a ton out of this. And I hope that you are hearing some similarities as well. It is a joy to be here with you, and we will see you back here tomorrow.